We're going to transition a little here and talk about some of the barriers to self-mastery, some of the barriers to raising your level of consciousness, some of the barriers to your ability to discern the truth from the lie. The first one here is I'm going to talk about self-mastery here and what it is that one of the purposes and one of the reasons that I believe that we are here. This is a hierarchical progression of many of you have seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs and things of that nature. This is this one that I think helps depict the evolution of self-mastery here. And one of the biggest barriers to that is mind control. It's mind control. And we're going to be talking about overt and covert mind control techniques. We're going to be talking about methods of manipulation and how the dark occultists or the master manipulators, that 1% of those that have that knowledge, understand human consciousness and the human psyche. That was the other natural law and the understanding of consciousness, human consciousness. They have hidden away that knowledge of how we work, our psyches work, and how to manipulate our perceptions in order to control our behavior. So mind control. Let's get into it here. One of the macro level areas of mind control I want to touch on here is worldview poisoning. And when we talk about worldview, what I'm referring to is the overarching or the global perception of what you have about the world in general and a lot of the existential things that affect humanity. Why we're here. How did we get here? What is our purpose? Are humans good or evil? Things of that nature. So your worldview and how you obtained it. Most people got their worldview through their environment, through your family as you were growing up when you were little, mom and dad, then on to the indoctrination system that most people put themselves through, some into the higher indoctrination system. Your experiences, things that you've experienced, they all contribute to your worldview or what you perceive about the conditions of the world. Many of your worldviews, many people's worldviews come from religion and religious beliefs. We go back to the concept of original sin in the Garden of Eden. And I'm going to say some things that, again, I know that are going to upset a lot of people who claim to be Christians. I'm going to give my understanding of what I believe the original concept of sin to be, the Garden of Eden, the Tree of Life, some things that I'm going to touch on, things that Christ said in the New Testament that through discernment, I believe that I can take the allegorical meaning behind what the Bible says and not the literal, which many people grew up believing. In any case, people have a tendency to believe that human beings by nature are either good or evil. And a lot of these concepts, again, comes from fundamental religious beliefs, the doctrine of original sin, where Adam and Eve were in the garden and were told, you may eat of the tree of life, but you may not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And when we talk about sin, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but throughout the presentations, we are going to be talking about religion, Christianity, Buddhism. We're going to be talking about a lot of these overlying concepts, because these aren't just found in the Christian Bible and the Old Testament, where the three major religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, those canons. No, I'm not talking about that. We're talking about that incident in the Garden of Eden where original sin, where Eve succumbed to temptation from the serpent, ate the apple, gave it to Adam. When we talk about original sin, I'd like you to kind of think of it in the context of, instead of man's fall from grace, think about it as missing the mark. I'd like to kind of get you to think about the original sin as missing the mark. And put it in context. I mean, if you think that the creator of the universe was going to cause man to suffer terribly, man and woman, throughout the rest of their existence as a result of eating a piece of fruit off of a tree, if you think that is literally the case, you have some work to do. That's not the allegorical meaning. My belief is that when the creator of the universe said, "You are the tree of life, you are free to eat from. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you are not." What the creator of the universe, those boundary conditions that were set then in the Garden of Eden, what they consisted of basically is, you are not free to consume or to take within yourself the ability to determine, or the right to determine, good from evil or right from wrong. I set those boundary conditions as the creator of the universe, not you as man. So what we're really talking about here, if you want to get down to it, is moral relativism, one of the tenets of Satanism, for those of you that watched some of my presentations. It's one of the tenets of Satanism, moral relativism. The creator of the universe, that analogy, what I believe that was meant to teach people is that I am the creator of the universe. I create boundary conditions. These are these boundary conditions. You do not get to take within yourself the right or the ability to determine right from wrong. There is an objective right from wrong, and I created those boundary conditions, and you need to adhere to those. And what he's talking about is natural law. The creator of the universe, call him God, Allah, whatever. It's not important. What is important is the message for humanity there. Human beings, this concept of good and evil is something that I think can be best described as, here using this analogy, I don't believe that human beings are either good nor evil, but what we are is programmable. When I say that, what I mean is that we are like computers. We are not computers. We are like computers. And this first slide here, the one on the left here, talking about cognitive psychology, it's based on the computer metaphor that we try to understand the mind by comparing it to a computer. With a computer, you have input, you have a keyboard, you have a mouse, whatnot. You click on that, punch a key, that provides input, a command to what it is that you want the computer to do for you. Then you have processing. That's your software, your hardware, all those other things that process that information. Call it information if you want. Input is information. It processes that in our minds. That input, that information is we process it. We take all the logical fallacies out. We rationalize. We use logic to determine the truth or veracity of something, and then we have output. Something pops up on your computer screen when you punch that button or click that mouse. It's processed, information is processed, and the output, the result, is what shows up on your computer screen. The human mind is the same way or similar to it. We have input, we have the information aspect of it. And this goes back to the trivium. The trivium is, in classical terminology, was grammar, logic, and rhetoric. It's the same as input, processing, and output. Knowledge, grammar, knowledge, rhetoric. Knowledge, grammar, rhetoric. So those three aspects exist in the classical definition of that way of learning. Then we have input, processing, and output, to use computer terminology in the vernacular. Over on the right-hand side, so the quality, my point is that the quality of information, quality in, quality out, it's no different than, the analogy of your mind is no different than the analogy of your body. If you put crap in your body, you're going to get crappy output. And it's easy to use this computer analogy here to help describe how the human mind works. You put crap into your mind, you don't know how to process it, you don't understand logical fallacies, you can't use reason, you're going to get a crappy output in there. This quote over here: humans are the most programmable systems on earth. We are all programmed, and we can all be reprogrammed. Our programming is our governance. You know, if you think about a small child in their formative years, 0 to 7 generally is what those are called, as the formative years. Format. You know, you think of computer terminology. You format a computer, you format a hard drive of a computer. Well, those formative years are where a lot of children, get their worldviews, their information about life, how the world works, their relationship to it, all of those things. And then throughout the years, they get information, many of which is not correct information, whether it's from your parents, whether it's from religious leaders, educational institutions, whatnot. So the output's crap, and that's what we're experiencing now here. Look at our education system, for example. Some other barriers: mind control, worldview poisoning, solipsism. Egotism and solipsism are also one of the first tenets of Satanism. You could probably separate egotism and solipsism. Egotism would be at the very top, where the ego is all that exists. Your ego and your belief that you are the only thing that exists, and is of the most importance. Your survival, your success, your thoughts, your truth. The only thing that exists in reality is what goes on in your mind, your truth. Solipsism is one of the most pervasive forms of worldview poisoning at work in most areas of our world. Solipsism is the notion that nothing outside of the self can truly be known to exist, and that there's no objective reality. Again, my truth is the only truth that exists. There is no such thing as objective morality. I get to decide what's right and wrong. It's a subjective viewpoint. Only subjective reality or personal experiences in the world can be trusted and verified as truth. Only I exist. You are an illusion. That's what we tell ourselves. People have a tendency to think, again, that they exist on an island of their own. Their thoughts and their actions and their emotions are all that are important. What's in it for me, I. And these are, get as butthurt as you want over this. People who think they understand what the definition of Satanism is. Again, you're going off the Hollywood version, conjuring up images of people worshiping the Christian version of the devil, things of that nature. That does happen. Yes, there is a religion, a formal religion, that is recognized by the U.S. government as the Church of Satan. It is a religion. But you don't understand the tenets of that religion. You don't understand the essence of what that religion is all about. Most people do not. These are tenets of Satanism. And most Christians have one or more of these beliefs as I go through these. It's not just egotism and solipsism. That's a start. I'm God. I'm God. I'm the only thing that exists. My thoughts, my reality, my truth is the only thing that matters, the only thing that exists. Survival, my freedom, it's all about me. Solipsism, there is no such thing as objective truth, objective reality, objective morality. That's called moral relativism. That's the next tenet down on the tenets of Satanism. You digress from egotism, solipsism, down into moral relativism, and into social Darwinism, the belief, well, if there's no objective morality, then I get to decide that, what's right and wrong. And if you're a moral or a social Darwinist, you believe that if there is no truth, no objective morality, it's survival of the fittest. Only the most ruthless, richest, most powerful people in the world should get to decide what's right and wrong. And we should also get to decide as a social Darwinist who gets to live and who gets to die, who gets to procreate and who doesn't. Seen any of that going on in the world now? Anybody? Yeah. Gates and his crew are eugenicists. That's the next tenet down on there from social Darwinism is eugenesis. These are the people that get to decide who gets to live, who gets to die, which genes get to, propagate, which ones don't, which is why they're coercing people into taking a, quote, biological experimental treatment. Barriers of the mind, worldview poisoning, the value of the individual. Let's go back to the last one here for just a second here, solipsism. How many of you have or are willing to sit down with yourself for even a few seconds and think about your worldview, think about how your mind has been conditioned and whether or not you believe any of these tenets here as I go through them. Be brutally honest with yourself. Be brutally honest with yourself. How many of you believe that there is no such thing as objective truth and that there is no such thing as objective morality? The same thing goes for this next topic here, worldview poisoning, the value of the individual. What we have over here is what most people place the value of the individual entirely on. Whether or not you're a celebrity, what's your value, your net worth, how much money you make, whether you're rich or whether you're powerful, you're a world leader or claim to be a world leader, versus the opposite of that, which is I'm of infinite worth with my own division or divine mission, which I'll strive to fulfill. See, evil, if you read Jeremy Locke's book on the end of all evil, evil attempts to destroy the individual worth. Is anything that tries to destroy freedom, and they do that by trying to destroy your worldview, belief in what the value of the individual is. We have infinite value, and yet those people that are the social conditioners, the mind controllers, and that's how they've been able to pull this off. Those very few at the top, folks, we didn't touch on it a whole lot because I wanted to hold off on getting into the mind control stuff here, and we will, but I think it's important to highlight some things here now. Those people at the very top are master psychologists, have been throughout history. Go back and think about the tribal leaders in the Yucatan and the Mayans and whatnot, sacrificing people at some point. And think about how they could get the masses to follow along. Think parallel to modern history with Nazi Germany. By the way, Hitler wasn't after the Jews, he was after the Germans, and he got them. So in any case, yes, he killed the Jews. I'm not disputing that fact at all. But he was after the German people in their minds, and he got it. You want to talk about the occult and the dark occult and the role of Nazism and communism and their involvement with the occult? Go do some research into the dark occult, how they understood, all the propagandists and the people of Nazi Germany and Stalin's regime and Mao's regime and Pol Pot's regime, how they understood these dynamics and how they could. You ask yourself, how in the world could they have ever gotten the Nazi or the German people to go along with all this, the soldiers to kill people and discriminate? This is how they did it, folks. They understand how the human psyche works. They understand propaganda. They understand, mind control. They understand manipulation. They understand these things. And they have think tanks. We, in the modern day, if Nazi Germany had the think tanks and the technology that we have today, we'd be looking at a different reality. But they didn't, thank God. But they do now. We brought a lot of Nazi scientists and stuff over. Many of you don't know that, but the reality is we brought a ton of Nazi scientists, whether it was Werner von Braun and the rocket program, or those master manipulators that understood, because our intelligence agencies wanted to know, how in the world did you do it? How did you get these people to go along with this? How did all this work? So we learned from the best. We brought them over here, and now our intelligence agencies, our think tanks, spend billions of dollars using psychologists and the science of psychiatry to learn how to manipulate and control the masses. Simple as that. You get pissy about, well, no, it's got to be more complex than that. No, it has to be more than that. It's not. Some other barriers to mind control, worldview poisoning. This is a quote by Rear Admiral Grace Hopper. She was, I think, 79 years old at the time she was commissioned as a Rear Admiral, the first Rear Admiral female in military history. And I'm not sure, I don't remember if she was in the Reserve Navy or if she was in the regular Navy or not, but in any case, a brilliant woman who really pioneered a lot of the computer technology that we have today, particularly the language aspects of it. A brilliant woman. She said the most damaging phrase in language is, "We've always done it this way." I think, if I'm not mistaken, she was also attributed to the quote, "It's better to ask permission than forgiveness." I might be wrong about that, but I think that one is attributed to her as well. But in any case, that worldview poisoning, that view, change is impossible. They never had, in her case, what I'm alluding to here is, number one, they first of all never had a female Rear Admiral in the Navy before. It wasn't conceived, never been done. Plus her way of, the way that she approached computers and language and programming and whatnot was totally out of line with what was accepted at the time. The other poisoning that occurs oftentimes, that go hand in hand with a lot of that, with the change is impossible, is action is meaningless. I'm just one person, and here's the depiction of David and Goliath. I'm just one person. What can I do? What could I possibly do to change the way things are right now? Well, you know how that story went if you read or understand the Bible. And a lot of times, that mind control is put into people intentionally. In many cases, it gets people to stand down, to not take action. If you believe that change is impossible, whether it's yourself internally or whether change in the external world is impossible, you're going to stand down. You're not going to take action. And if you do, it's meaningless. They have all the weapons. They're much larger, smarter, richer than I am. It's meaningless. The things that I do are not going to have an impact on it. If that's how you think about things, your worldview has been poisoned. If you think that the value of the individual is based on their worth, their personal worth, or their success, your worldview has been poisoned. Your job, your challenge is to use introspection, go back and find out why you think the way that you do, why you believe these things. Another barrier. Worldview poisoning ultimately over time results in a worldview schism. And by a schism, I'm talking about a rift, a split between composing thoughts or opposing thoughts in the way your mind works. And a lot of people fall into one of two categories here. They believe in either the randomness or the determinist aspects of reality. People who believe in randomness is that the universe is a grand accident, Big Bang Theory, just happened. On the other hand, you have the determinist component in that schism. Those people, the right brain people, that believe that God controls every event in creation. Randomness, there's no underlying intelligence in nature. On the right-hand side, you have this split rift where on the opposite end of the spectrum, all occurrences are preordained. God controls everything, so there's no reason to take action. Change is impossible. Natural law does not exist on the randomness component. It's nothing that we can see, doesn't exist. It's a construct of the human mind. Spiritual law is not a reality. It's not the same as the physical laws. We can put our hands on the physical laws. We can't see the spiritual laws. They don't exist. That our existence is purposeless. There is no meaning to existence. Since it was a grand accident, there's no underlying intelligence. There's no laws governing the boundary conditions of existence. It's purposeless. It's meaningless. We're just here. We're biological creatures. We suck oxygen. We eat food. We crap, and ultimately we get old and we die. There is no purpose. On the other hand, across on the other side, on the deterministic component next to across from the natural law doesn't exist, is free will does not exist. We don't have free will. The creator of the universe did not endow us with free will. It's all determined. It has no role in what occurs in our existence. And on the opposite side of existence is purposeless. Over in the determinism side, you have change is impossible. It gets you to stand down, and action is meaningless. And if you watched a lot of the individuals' responses to COVID, and what was happening, businesses were complying, churches were shutting down, and I'll assert that primarily it's because of the concern over their precious 501c3 status. They complied with the government's laws. Here are people who are supposed to be epitomizing and demonstrating the fact that we're supposed to follow God's law. But in case there's a conflict and man's laws, we should supersede it then. We're going to err on the side of our 501c3 and close our churches down because we're told to. That happened. Everybody saw it happen. What does that say? What does that say to you? And then hallmarks of, these are all on the randomness side here. Those are all hallmarks, the left brain side here. If you want to use that, you see underneath here, we have the left brain hemisphere, the right brain hemisphere. We talked about this quite a bit in the introductory video. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it here. At some point, we're going to dive deep into this aspect here and how the human mind works and how they control and manipulate it. But I'm just touching on it here now, so just bear with me. These are hallmarks of atheism and scientism. And over here on the right-hand side, these are hallmarks of religious extremism. So neither one of these schisms are accurate. Neither one of them. Where you will find the truth is in the middle here. The Buddhists talk about a lot of taking the middle path. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Buddhism, Gnosticism, and some of these other philosophies. And many of them talk about the middle path. Not getting stuck in thesis or antithesis, but using synthesis or this middle path here to determine the truth. There is a deterministic component to the truth, and that is natural law. Natural law is those boundary conditions that I talked about earlier that exist. That is the deterministic component. The free will component, or the random component, is free will. The creator of the universe has endowed us with free will. That is the random component of the truth. You have the natural law, which is the deterministic component. Those are the boundary conditions that exist. And then we have free will, which is the random component. We choose right from wrong. We have the ability to choose. If we understand what the difference is, the objective differences between right and wrong, we have a choice. We can choose right action. We can choose wrong action. People say, "Well, during the COVID crisis, I didn't have a choice. I was going to lose my job. I'd lose my job if I didn't take the shot. If I didn't comply, I was going to lose my job." You had a choice. It's a difficult choice. I'll give you that. But you had a choice. To say that you had you have no other talent, skills, or abilities to contribute to this world. And I know a lot of law enforcement officers and people in the military have that mindset. What else would I do? What else would I do? I don't know anything else. So all I know how to do is be a cop, be a soldier. What else would I do? And those go from, and a lot of that is as a result of self-loathing, self-hatred, not recognizing your true power and your true potential. In any case, we'll talk about some of those dynamics too here as we go along. So the barriers, a worldview schism. The worldview schism results in a mental schism, a schism of the mind. If your worldview has been poisoned and you are locked in a predominantly left brain or a predominantly right brain aspect of either randomness or determinism, if you're locked into one side or the other predominantly, ultimately it's going to create a schism in the mind. And look at the diagram here. On the left-hand side, the left brain, or the left hemisphere of the brain, you have the master, and the right hemisphere represents the slave mind. Mastermind and the slave mind. On the master side, you have atheism, solipsism. We just said what that is. Scientism. That's the new religion now. That's one of the new religions of the world there now, is scientism. Think of Fauci if you want to. I am science. I am science. No more questioning. No more discovery. It's settled. I'm science. Don't get me started on that shit stain. I think if you watched any of the city council meetings, you know how I feel about him. But in any case, scientism is the new one of the new religions. Trust the science. It's settled. Moral relativism, the belief that there is no objective morality. I talked about social Darwinism, eugenics, and then at the very bottom there, totalitarianism. We'll describe what that is here too. Those are tenets of Satanism. And again, I'd be willing to bet you if I went down, and I was able to sit down with many Christians, many people who consider themselves good people, not just Christians, but those that consider themselves good people. If they were truly honest, they would subscribe to one or more of these tenets and yet call themselves Christians. Let's use the example of social Darwinism here, eugenics. Since, big thing in the news now is that Georgia Guidestones have been destroyed. What all that means and what's the hidden meaning behind the Guidestones, and is it a eugenics agenda, and all these things. Well, let's just assume for argument sakes that that's what the reason that those monuments were erected by a bunch of elite rich people who wanted to keep the population at under 500 million people. Let's just suppose for the sake of argument that that's the case. How many of you can honestly sit down and when you ask yourself the question, are we overpopulated? Is the world overpopulated? Are all of the resources scarce because of this overpopulation? do you believe that we are overpopulated? We have too many people on this planet, and those resources are scarce. We're not using the resources the way we should, and so they're few. And so yeah, there's certain people that probably should depart. Those of a lower order than I am, than me. Put whoever you want to in that box of the others, the undermixed, those that are that fall into that category, the people that you think should no longer populate this planet. I talk to a lot of Christians when I'll ask them that question. Do you think we're overpopulated? And then if that's the case, then the next logical step in the progression here is, well, then who should get to decide? Who should get to decide then which genes should be propagated, who should live, who is essential and who is not essential on this planet, not just the business, but who's essential as a human to be on this planet. See, again, we lie to ourselves. We lie to ourselves. How many people are stuck in that belief in science, scientism, and that, the experts, they must know, and I trust the experts. That's that logical fallacy of appealing to authority. It is a logical fallacy. There are many of them. Study them. Study them is the only thing I would recommend to you. Let's go over here to the slave mind. And in the middle here is mind control, media, money, and malnutrition. When we talk about malnutrition, we're not just talking about the physical malnutrition. We're also talking about the knowledge malnutrition here as well. And they use media, they use money and information. But we're also talking about the physical. We could be talking about the physical malnutrition too, with what's coming with supply chain issues and food shortages and all of those type of things. But we're not going to get into that now. In any case, on the slave side, the opposite side, the atheists don't believe in a creator of the universe, no divine intelligence. Or on the other side is the extreme, the religionists, those that aspire to the cultural religions. Across from solipsism, scientism, you have unworthiness. That's a slave mentality. I'm not smart enough to know the difference between objective truth or objective morality. Better trust that to people who are a lot smarter than I am. I'm not worthy. It gets you into that natural progression of self-loathing. Then you get down into denigrates into in many cases addiction, social Darwinism. Over on the left-hand side here, we said had to do with those individuals that believe that they should have the right because of their status in the world to determine who should propagate, who should live and die, and all that. Across the eugenic side over here, you have the slave mind is the order follower. I did in the introductory video, I likened law enforcement and military primarily to the order followers. But we saw that throughout the COVID crisis, we had order followers from corporate CEOs down to city governments, state governments, federal governments. How many of your congressmen, senators, assemblymen, when this thing all kicked off, you didn't hear a thing from them? We went into lockdowns. Not a single peep out of any senator, attorney general, constitutional attorney, anybody about, let's pause for a second here. Do we have the right to do the things that we're doing here? Went lockstep. Didn't question, put their consciousness up on a shelf, and just followed orders, dictates, mandates from somebody who they believed had the authority that was higher than them. The master over here, again, think of that pyramid. There's always this master. It's a perfect description or illustration of the master-slave structure that's set up on this planet. Everybody's a master, everybody's a slave. There's always somebody below you and somebody above you on the pecking order here. If you're, think of your family, dad, mom at the top, kids down at the bottom. Think of your organization. Think of the military. Think of law enforcement. Okay. It's a master-slave relationship, and that creates cognitive dissonance. That's what you're trying to hold two competing thoughts in your mind at the same time, and you're ignoring the reality of the situation. Barriers. Chronic mental schism results in the left brain prison. We said that that poison worldview would ultimately result in a schism of the mind, or that would result in a worldview schism, which would ultimately result in a schism of the mind. And ultimately, if you stay locked predominantly in either that master-slave mentality or the slave mentality, master think or slave think, and most people in general fall into the left brain, chronic left brain master think mind. People in military and law enforcement, majority of the population in general are stuck in left brain, what we call the left brain prison. And it's imbalance, and it's an imbalance of the mind. You're predominantly left brain, and to be in that condition chronically means that the masculine side or the dominant side of the brain creates suppression of the emotion, or the right hand side, and eventually roots us in the reptilian brain. If you look over here, you have the depiction of the brain in the center here, the human brain. At the very front, there is what they call the neocortex, or the new brain, a higher order thinking brain. The middle brain is the mammalian or the limbic system that controls our emotions. The reptilian brain, or the R complex of the brain stem in that area is responsible for survival, fight or flight, things of that nature. And if you're stuck in chronic left brain masculine dominance, and you suppress the right side, the emotional side, ultimately what happens, you don't take emotions into consideration, or that care factor into consideration. It's just thought and action. You take emotion out of the equation, and ultimately that roots you in that reptilian brain down here, that survival brain, where it's all about me, it's all about my wants, it's all about my survival, what I get out of life, who I can screw over in the process. The means justifies the ends justify the means here. That's that master think. The chronic right brain, the feminine side, we refer to it, it's just characteristics, feminine characteristics. It has nothing to do with the physical structure of the brain. Chronic right brain dominance creates suppression of the survival instinct, and eventually roots us in the mammalian brain, where we're only we react emotionally. Everything that governs our thoughts and our emotions are driven from the emotional side of the brain. Again, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the brain and how the brain operates. This is just an overview. If it leaves you scratching your head a little bit, I understand that. Stick with me. We'll get into that a little bit further. Here's some more barriers to self-mastery here. As we talked about mind control. We talked about worldview poisoning. We talked about the schisms that are created at left brain prison. These are all barriers to self-mastery, self-actualization, self-discovery, all those things that were in that pyramid I showed you earlier. They're all barriers. Denial. Well, this is a big one. This is a big one for people. The depiction at the top, of course, everybody's familiar with this. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. People with their heads in the sand. You saw this a lot during the COVID crisis. People denying the reality of what was occurring around them, or not questioning it. I'd rather stick my head in the sand and deny what's occurring, the reality of what is occurring around me. The fact that we have our government, who not even 5 years ago, I couldn't even imagine. Most people couldn't even imagine them taking taking the actions that they did in the overreach during the COVID fraud. Most people would deny what was occurring, or they would justify or rationalize. They're doing it for our own good. Just think about the Patriot Act after 9/11 and all of the things that went along with that. The infringements on our rights and our freedoms that still exist. Again, once government takes its imposition and acquiescence, once government imposes a law, regulation, restriction on our freedoms, they never give it back, never get ground. Myself, as a de-occultist and as an abolitionist, modern day abolitionist, if you want to put me in a box, in a category, I would say that those are probably the closest to describing my position, my philosophy now. I'm an abolitionist. Look, people want to deny what was occurring here. The government was taking our rights. They were compelling people, coercing people under the threat of force or violence. You weren't wearing masks in some states. You got fined. People were arrested. Church leaders were arrested. Prayer sessions were disrupted. Officers went out and arrested people out in parking lots, closed down businesses, things of that nature. The order followers did that. And people were denying the reality of what was occurring. Their rights, their personal property rights, whether it's a business, whether it's your freedom to put a device over your face or an injection in your arm. Those rights were slowly, or actually rapidly, they had the pedal on the gas and they were being eroded right in front of us. Nobody was talking about it. None of your legislators, none of you, and yet you want to deny that. You want to, they were doing what was in our best interest. The collective rights were more important than your individual rights anyway, and I understand that. I get that. That's where many people that's what many people fall. They would deny the fact that the government was destroying our personal liberties and rights, and they were embracing the lie, embracing the COVID lie. Well, the reason they were doing it was because of this. The reason they made us jump through and do these gymnastics when we walked into a restaurant and put the mask on until you sit down and then you can take it off. Or same thing with an airplane, or whatever the case is, these ridiculous rituals that they had people. And by the way, there's a method, there's a reason why they have you go through these rituals. We talk about in cult indoctrination. There's a purpose to these things. So we'll talk about that later. But denialism. We want to deny reality. We want to ignore the truth about what is occurring around us. This is a quote from Travis Walton. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. If you Google Travis Walton and the UFO incident, I think Travis was interviewed on Joe Rogan Experience, I think in 2021, somewhere around there. Anyway, this is he was a Forest Service worker in Arizona here, as a matter of fact, not too far from where I currently reside, and him and some other workers, and they claim that a UFO came and abducted him, and he was found 5 days later wandering around and had very little recollection of what occurred here. Whether you believe one way or the other in UFOs, that's not the point I'm trying to make here. He went through some experiences trying to get people, as did the other people that witnessed what had occurred here, to believe what had happened, to actually buy into what had occurred here. And it was the biggest problem I think he faced, and he recognized it when he put this quote together. He said, "I've come to realize that the biggest problem anywhere in the world is that people's perceptions of reality are compulsively filtered through the screening mesh of what they want and do not want to be true." And that goes back to denial. They want to deny reality. Well, you talk to them about your rights are being destroyed, your freedoms are being destroyed incrementally here, and we're heading towards tyranny fast. I don't want that to be true. That can't be true. You've been lied to your whole life about pretty much just about everything, including most of what you believe, your hard-held religious beliefs. I don't want that to be true. Or I do want this to be true. That's how that filter that's put up in front of most people's perceptions, that's what it consists of, that denial. Let's talk about fears. Some of the barriers to self-mastery, self-actualization, self-discovery. Fears. We're going to generally, we can break those down into two categories: rational fears and irrational fears. The first illustration on the left there is one most of us would consider a rational fear. Being chased by a lion is a rational fear. A large predatory animal like that that could harm you or kill you is a rational fear to have. An irrational fear, an example of an irrational fear, is depicted in the image on the right here. People are afraid of their shadows. That's an irrational fear. That's not reality. And yet they think that the shadow represents a reality, and it doesn't. So that would be considered an irrational fear. Primal fears. Primal fears are rational fears in that they are hardwired into us as human beings. And you think about the first one here in the bottom left, the Grim Reaper here, is the fear of death. Innately, we are hardwired. People have an innate fear of dying, primarily because they don't understand death. They don't understand life to begin with, and what death actually is. They don't understand who they are, their purpose for being here, and so death is something that most people innately fear. Second one here is fear of isolation, fear of being alone. We are social creatures by nature. And yet, if you look at what happened during the initial rollout and response during the COVID crisis, they wanted everybody to isolate, stay alone, stay home. Grandma is in the nursing home, or put her in the basement. Separate yourselves from other people, whether it's 6 foot, 10 foot, 5 foot, whatever distance they wanted to arbitrarily come up with. Don't talk to strangers. Don't talk to people. So isolation and fear of isolation, it's also a very effective technique for cult indoctrination. It's the very first one, is to isolate people. Do it in the military, do it in law enforcement. You're isolated from your loved ones, general public, everybody else, and you're indoctrinated through repetition, trauma, and all other kinds of ways. And we'll talk about those. But anyway, isolation is another primal fear. Fear of the dark, that is a primal fear. Most people have an innate or a hardwired fear of the dark, which is why the light is so important, and being a light in the world, and being a light occultist, someone who wants to de-occult this knowledge and bring light into the darkness, is so important. That's why I'm so passionate about what it is that I'm doing here. I think of anything that I've ever done in my whole life in service to others or myself has been this work by far. In any case, predators. And I stuck this image of, if any of you watched the movie Predators with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the original one, and this is the creature from that movie. Predators. We have primal fear of predators, whether it's back in prehistoric days of saber-toothed animals, or modern day predators, or what we consider predators, large animals or predators of that nature. So these are primal fears, and they're rational fears. There's a basis, there's an understanding for them, and in most cases it has to do with the reality of who we are as human beings, and how we operate.